To my co-med PE teachers, especially to our professor, Dr. Perfilia Esporilan, and to all the panel members, a pleasant day to each one of us. I am Mariel Jam A. Marquez, a MAED PE candidate in this public forum, and this is my research title, Teachers' Motivation, Job Satisfaction, and Teaching Effectiveness of PE Teachers, a Correlational Study. And for my introduction, the problem, UNESCO reported 44% cancellation of physical education lessons for having a low status as well as its teachers with 18% globally. Richardson 2014 stated that there are many teachers in different countries who are poorly motivated for the reason of low job satisfaction, which can greatly affect their performance to be effective educators, and Dwivedi and Singh 2019 stated that among the subjects of English, mathematics, and science, physical education is the lowest percentage of teaching effectiveness, and there is only less than 70% of teaching effectiveness of male and female teachers in teaching physical education. And in solution, Manalo et al. 2019 also affirmed that with high level of teachers' motivation and job satisfaction can positively influence their engagement and commitment, and teachers can happily and effectively teach if they are contented with their jobs, according to Bona 2020. In the research gap, there is no study in Davao Occidental which determines the relationship between teachers' motivation, job satisfaction, and teaching effectiveness. Furthermore, no studies have been conducted and or published in which the study participants are MAPE or PE teachers. And for the related studies, under the under teachers' motivation, there are communication, progress in profession, institution, and expectation. And in job satisfaction, the related studies are supervision, colleagues, working condition, pay, responsibility, work itself, advancement, security, and recognition. And lastly, for the teaching effectiveness, there are learning experiences, learning environment, communication, and evaluation. The following are the research questions that are needed to be answered by the participants. Number one, what is the level of teachers' motivation of PE teachers in terms of communication, progress in profession, institution, and expectation? Number two, what is the level of job satisfaction of PE teachers in terms of supervision, colleagues, working conditions, pay, responsibility, work itself, advancement, security, and recognition? And number three, what is the level of teaching effectiveness of PE teachers in terms of learning experiences, learning environment, communication, and evaluation? And lastly, number four, is there a significant relationship between teachers' motivation and teaching effectiveness of PE teachers, and job satisfaction and teaching effectiveness of PE teachers. And for my theoretical framework, I utilize the theory of action according to Agaris 1997. This theory is very important in teaching and learning, for its focus is the implementation of managing learning environment and teaching methods. Job I Flood and Brown 2018 stated that theory of action approach assists teachers by ensuring interventions such as evidence-informed teaching practices are effective. And for my conceptual framework, my two independent variables, which are teachers' motivation and job satisfaction. In teachers' motivation, the indicators are communication, progress in profession, institution, and expectation. And for job satisfaction are supervision, colleagues, working condition, pay, responsibility, work itself, advancement, security, and recognition. And lastly, for my dependent variable, the indicate which is teaching effectiveness, there are learning experiences, learning environment, communication, and evaluation. And for my research design, I utilize quantitative research design, correlational study, and the appropriateness of the study. And for my participants, I selected public elementary and secondary MAPE teachers with 3 to above years of service in school division of Davao Occidental, Malito North District, Davao Occidental, and in random sampling. And I utilize the statistical tools of mean, dot, standard deviation, multiple regression, and correlation coefficient R. And for my research instruments, I utilize questionnaires for job satisfaction, teacher job satisfaction among K to 12 public school teachers, a mix, for teachers motivation, development of motivation scale for teachers, and in teaching effectiveness, there are development of the clinical teaching effectiveness questionnaire. And this is my questionnaire for teachers motivation, for my job satisfaction, which there are 66 items, and for my teaching effectiveness, and my references in APA citation, APA format. And again, this is my research title, Teachers' Motivation and Job Satisfaction and Teaching Effectiveness of PE Teachers, a Correlational Study. Again, I am Mariel Jam A. Marquez, a MAED PE candidate. And thank you for listening, and God bless us all.
Good day. This is Mr. Philip John P. Villotas, a MAED PE candidate. The title of my study is Students' Engagement, Attitude Towards Physical Activity, and Psychological Well-Being of Senior High School Students. The problematic issues of my studies are COVID-19 impact on the psychological well-being and psychological distress. Worldwide, COVID-19 had a huge impact on the psychological well-being of people, causing similar reaction in terms of emotions and concern at the population level that led to a high incidence of psychological disorders. Students are a special social group with active life habits based on relationships and contacts, physical and university activities, travel and gatherings that essentially change their life drastically, thus making them at risk of a psychological distress in the case of traumatic events. The level of physical activity performed during the quarantine results in a protective factor against psychological distress. The beneficial effect of physical activity on psychological well-being has been widely shown in literature. Furthermore, recent studies demonstrated that exercising and physical activity during quarantine is critical to promote the psychological and physical health, particularly the young people. The psychological illnesses, especially during the current lockdown and after the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, participation in physical activity and exercise should be prioritized for people of all ages. Furthermore, recent studies demonstrated that exercising and physical activity during quarantine is critical to promote both psychological and physical health, particularly for young people. For the gap, there are limited studies about the relationship between students' engagement, attitude towards physical activity, and psychological well-being. Most of the available research conducted were from other countries and shows incongruence of results. Henceforth, this study aims to contribute to the literature and research on students' engagement, attitude towards physical activity, and psychological well-being within a localized setting. This shows the statistical basis or results on the COVID-19 impact on psychological well-being among university students. The study analyzed that 35.33% of the university students had symptoms of anxiety and 72.93% of depression. Although with mild symptoms, this confirms that the pandemic increased common psychological health disorders across population. That shows with the Asia and Europe. However, the student cohort shows a prevalence of anxiety and depression almost twice as high as that observed in the general population. The finding is in line with what has been observed in other studies, where an increase in anxiety and depression has observed during pandemic and particularly during lockdown period in the university students. Therefore, students represent a vulnerable population for common health disorders. Studies shows to reduce psychological health illnesses, especially during the current lockdown and after the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Participation in physical activity and exercise should be prioritized for people of all age groups. Mental health in students is a growing concern. Students are struggling with their mental health at an unprecedented level. If students struggle with psychological health, it could impact how they function at school and at home. Emphasizing physical activity in youth has shown to alleviate issues for some of these students who are struggling with psychological health. Engagement is a growth producing activity through which an individual allocate attention in active response to the environment. Engagement related to school activity for student engagement has become an important concept related to multiple educational outcomes. This is the research question of my study. This study aims to determine the relationship of students' engagement, attitude towards physical activity, and psychological well-being of senior high school students. Specifically, seek answers to the following questions. Number one, what is the level of students' attitude towards physical activity in terms of fun, learning, benefit, fitness, self-efficacy, and personal best? What is the level of students' engagement in terms of affective, behavioral, and cognitive? The third question is, what is the level of student psychological well-being in terms of autonomy, environmental mastery, personal growth, positive relation, purpose in life, and self-acceptance? The fourth one, is there a significant relationship between students' attitude towards physical activity and student psychological well-being? 4.2, students' engagement and psychological well-being. Do the students' engagement and attitude towards physical activity influence the psychological well-being of the senior high school students? The theoretical framework of this study is anchored to existential humanistic theory. Taken together, the existential and humanistic theories propose that each individual has the freedom and responsibility to transcend the meaninglessness of their existence. The existential humanistic theory of personality change can be tested using a measure of psychological well-being. Psychological well-being is concerned with the feelings associated with an individual's strive to grow and fully develop oneself amid life challenges. This is the conceptual framework of the study. As you can see, I have two independent variables, namely attitude towards physical activity and students' engagement, with a dependent variable, the psychological well-being. My study will utilize the qualitative research design and descriptive correlational. The participants of my studies are public senior high school in the division of Davao Occidental. The process of choosing my participants will be done through random sampling. The statistical treatment that I will be utilizing are mean score, standard deviation, Pearson product moment correlation, and regression analysis. My research instruments are first is the student's engagement, which is the student engagement in schools questionnaire. This is my student's engagement questionnaire. For my second variable, my second independent variable, attitude towards physical activity, I will be utilizing the attitude towards physical activity scale for higher education students in Turkey. This is the adopted questionnaire for attitude towards physical activity. For my dependent variable, the psychological well-being, I will be utilizing the RIFS psychological well-being scale in a population sample. This is the research instrument for psychological well-being, the second part of the psychological well-being test questionnaire. And these are my references.
Psychosocial influences, attitudes to physical activity, and learning motivation in physical education. According to Sedan Top, physical education becomes devalued since school children lose confidence and motivation to attend these classes. Steed and Dr. Neville, year 2010, stated that there is a positive association between physical activity and several components of mental health, including self-esteem, emotive well-being, spirituality, and future expectations, all of which may impact on academic achievement. There is a need to investigate this study to show that psychosocial influences attributes to physical activity impacts the learning motivation in physical education. These are the components for the related studies. For the psychosocial influences, self-efficacy, social influences, beliefs, and intentions. Under attributes of physical activity, we have physical activity for social purposes, health and fitness, thrills and excitement, aesthetic experience, recreation and relaxation, and meeting a physical challenge. For the learning motivation, we have the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. These are the research questions. Number one, what are the psychosocial influences of physical activity towards the learning motivation in physical education in terms of self-efficacy, social influences, beliefs, and intentions? Question number two, what are the attributes to physical activity towards the learning motivation in physical education in terms of physical activity for social purposes, health and fitness, thrills and excitement, aesthetic experience, recreation and relaxation, and meeting a physical challenge? Third question, what are the learning motivation in physical education? This is the conceptual framework. For the independent variables, number one, we have the psychosocial influences. Under this, we have self-efficacy, social influences, beliefs, and intentions. The second independent variable is the attitudes to physical activity. Under this, we have physical activity for social purposes, health and fitness, thrills and excitement, aesthetic experience, recreation and relaxation, and meeting a physical challenge. For our dependent variable, we have the learning motivation in physical education. We have intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. For our theoretical framework, this study is anchored to Noor and Suhirman, year 2019, that the curriculum policy in schools supports to create and develop a school environment that is filled with physical activity. An environment that is physically active, both at school and in the community, can help develop, maintain, and protect the motivation of children's physical activity and also support their academic achievement. For the research design, this study will utilize a quantitative research design, descriptive correlational, and random sampling. For the participants of this study, there will be 150 PE students in different private schools in General Santos City, and the researcher will be conducting random sampling. For the statistical tool, the researcher will be using the following questionnaires. Number one, items for measuring psychosocial determinants of behavior. Second, attitudes toward physical activity. Third, motivation of physical activity and exercise. And fourth, the post-experimental extrinsic motivation inventory. The researcher will be using standard deviation or the mean median mode. And here are the references. That would be all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, especially to our panelists and Dr. Paralan. At this moment, I am going to present to you a thesis proposal to motivation and teacher satisfaction in sports facilities and equipment, a convergent design. Purpose of the study. A number of psychosocial determinants have been associated with a significant proportion of teachers with adjustment problems and low levels of motivation. Now, the motivation of physical education teachers is a critical factor in their approach to students and in achieving lesson outcomes. In this study, it was aimed to evaluate the motivation and the satisfaction levels of physical education teachers in terms of some variables. Lack of sports equipment in schools is affecting the growth of physical education and sports development. And since physical education was designed to help students develop their physical, mental, and social abilities, there is a need to explore the development of sport in public schools, particularly in the secondary schools. This paper presents the results of a survey that provides insights on the effect of inadequate sporting facilities and equipment on the development of sports in secondary public schools in Davao City, as well as the motivation and the satisfaction it can give to teachers in teaching physical education. The motivation and teacher satisfaction level on having adequate sporting activities, equipment, and facilities are discussed before recommending the appropriate programs that can help enhance sport development at the secondary school level in Davao City. Review of related literature. This chapter presents the related literature of the study after thorough and in-depth search conducted by the researcher. The ideas taken from them and that were included in this chapter helps in clarifying the information that are relevant and similar to the present study. Some of the related studies in this study. Evaluation of the motivation levels of physical education teachers. A study on the effects of inadequate sport equipment and facilities on sports development and academic performance in primary schools. Effect of the school facilities factor and sport activities factor on parents in terms of private and public school choice. The research questions. It can be said that the factors that can affect the motivation of a physical education teacher are slightly different than those of other branch teachers. In this context, the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation levels of physical education teachers were examined in terms of school facilities and school equipment. The research questions. What is the motivation level of the participants? Is there a significant difference in the motivation of the participants' satisfaction level by its indoor facilities? Is there a significant difference in the motivation of the participants' satisfaction level by its outdoor facilities? Is there a significant difference in the motivation of the participants' satisfaction level by its sports equipment? Is there a significant difference in the motivation of the participants' satisfaction level by its facility availability? Is there a significant difference in the motivation of the participants' satisfaction level by its equipment access? The theoretical lens. These physiological, psychological, and social needs of the individual create tension in the person. The person takes action to relieve this tension and engages in some purposeful behaviors. Therefore, motivation refers to the person's behavior towards a certain goal to meet his or her needs and to make an effort to reach the goal. Motivation can be perceived as a phenomenon that tries to answer the question of how and why people behave the way they do. There is definitely a driving force at the basis of the behaviors that people display in their daily activities. And this driving force can be characterized as motive, impulse, desire, or need. And based on this, motivation can be defined as the stimulation, direction, and reinforcement of human behavior, according to Landicho et al. Conceptual framework. The independent variables are motivation and sporting facilities and equipment, while the dependent variable is the teacher's satisfaction. The research design. To gain an in-depth understanding of the topic, this study has been carried out using the convergent parallel design, a mixed methods designs. The research process can be symbolized as quantitative and qualitative. A convergent parallel design entails that the researcher concurrently conducts the quantitative and qualitative elements in the same phase of the research process, weighs the methods equally, analyzes the two components independently, and interprets the results together. With the purpose of corroboration and validation, the researcher aims to triangulate the methods by directly comparing the quantitative statistical results and qualitative findings. In the research process, two datasets have been obtained, analyzed separately, and compared. The participants. For qualitative study group, criterion sampling, one of the purposeful sampling methods has been used to determine the study group. The basic criteria for determining the participants includes being a teacher of a physical education and sports subject and having taught the course for at least 1 year. 7 male and 7 female teachers were included in the study to maintain an equal number of males and females, and the participants were informed about the study and voluntarily participated. For quantitative study group, we have 150 physical education teachers were requested to fill out the quantitative data questionnaire. The participants were recruited using a simple random sampling method by proportioning the number of PE teachers chosen from secondary level public schools in Cluster 2 to the total numbers of PE teachers in that cluster. The questionnaire. The Situational Motivational Scale or SIMS. Instructions for answering this questionnaire. Read each item carefully. Using the scale below, please indicate the number that best describes the reason why you are currently engaged in this activity. Answer each item according to the following scale. 1. Does not correspond at all. 2. Corresponds very little. 3. Corresponds a little. 4. Corresponds moderately. 5. Corresponds a lot. And 7. Corresponds exactly. Teacher satisfaction level on sports facilities and equipment questionnaire. Direction. Rate your satisfaction level with the following aspects of the school: indoor facilities, outdoor facilities, sports equipment, facility availability, and equipment access. The references for this study: the Situational Motivational Scale or SIMS in Physical Education, a validation study among Norwegian adolescents. A study on the effects of inadequate sport equipment and facilities on sports development and academic performance in primary schools. Effect of the school facilities factor and sport activities factor on parents in terms of private and public school choice. And that ends, and that has been the thesis proposal to motivation and teachers' satisfaction on sports facilities and equipment, a convergent design. Thank you for listening and good afternoon.